Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Thanks. In the case of Bryan Kohberger, he will be arraigned this morning, here in just a little while. It will not be live from what I understand. And it appears that Court TV has control of the camera footage of that courtroom. So I will bring it to you as soon as I get it. But he will be arraigned here shortly. Lots of stuff going on this week with the Dateline special. If you haven't caught it, you can get it on NBC app or the Peacock app and stream it. There was a lot of alleged stories in that footage about Bryan and the knife and different details of the evidence gathered against him. But again, it's alleged, so I want you to watch that with a discerning eye. Here's some information from Keith, who hosts that show, and some opinions regarding it.
So tonight, you have exclusive reporting on the alleged murder weapon and the suspect. Can you give us a sense of the reveals viewers can expect this evening?
Yeah, this is a very disturbing story, as you say, and we have we have kind of waded through the picket fences to get to the kind of information we're looking for. Partly because the information flow has been shut down as much as possible, given the fact that there was so much misinformation out there. Our information about the K-bar knife and how he came to have it, about the nature of those traffic stops, about what was going on in his home, about what occurred at WSU, where he was a teaching assistant, are all fascinating material and will certainly contribute to the case against Bryan Kohberger, whether or not he's found guilty.
And he was just indicted by a grand jury this week, which means it skips the preliminary hearing, goes basically straight to trial. You may know this, Keith. Washington State University, WSU, is my alma mater in the small rural town of Pullman, Washington, which for me was such a feel-good place during my time there. So it makes it all the more difficult to wrap my head around this huge tragedy. You explored Kohberger's time there. Let's show a clip.
Kohberger and that knife traveled 2,500 miles until he reached his new home in Pullman, Washington, and Washington State University, where he would study for his doctorate in criminology.
Is it the kind of place where a person would want to go to do a PhD?
Yes, it is.
This is retired FBI agent Jennifer Coffendaffer. She's followed the case closely.
Not that many schools have all three levels, you know, the bachelor's, the master's, and the PhD. And it's pretty well regarded.
So perhaps that reputation is what drew Kohberger west? Or maybe something else.
Whoever it is that committed these murders, it's like being a casting agent that goes out to find someone who looks the part.
So the guest is at the end of the clip there, Dr. Gary Brucato, a forensic pathologist you spoke with. What other thoughts did he share with you about the crime and the suspect?
Well, he's a very interesting fellow. He's developed the Columbia University's mass murder database and has a tremendous amount of information about the kind of murderers behind the sort of crimes that we have seen here, and what drives them to that kind of behavior. Whether or not it was Bryan Kohberger, it was somebody who had built up a lot of resentments over the course of his life, who felt underappreciated, underloved, was probably socially awkward behaviors, and was looking to level the playing field. There's so much online, so much continuing discussion of the case, we felt it was reasonable for us to do some pretty thorough research on it and see what we could put together to help people understand where things are and where they might be going.
That thorough research led Dateline to discover disturbing details of Bryan Kohberger's actions before the murders in November of 2022.
We have spoken to some of the leading authorities anywhere on some of the questions involved in this particular case.
That information unveiling more about Kohberger's car ride across the country heading home for Christmas.
We have found what really did happen, and that's an interesting story in itself.
The origins of the K-bar knife believed to have been used in the killings.
So how much planning may have been involved, we can't say for sure, but there are some interesting indicators.
And the story of a student in one of Kohberger's TA classes, the alleged killer installing cameras in her apartment after a break-in.
He is now a suspect both in the initial break-in and for reasons of putting a camera in her apartment to which he would have had access.
Experts diving into behavior that lies behind this type of criminal activity.
When you trace his early life, it matches certain kinds of behaviors. Talking about seeing visual snow, for example, about the kind of dissociative episodes he would have gone through as a young person, and the resulting need to kind of level the playing field in a very visceral and intimate way with people who had rejected him in the past, or some representative of people who had rejected him in the past, especially young women with whom he had always been awkward and had some difficulty relating.
The special is Dateline's second show on the Moscow murders. Keith Morrison telling us about the tremendous interest in this case.
Well, it's an absolutely fascinating story. The character study involved here is disturbing, but I think it's probably important to know and to think about. It certainly wouldn't be the only kind of character like that, but it rather is like others who have made their way through the history of this country. And people will find it fascinating.
I think that's part of it. People just find this really fascinating and it's getting sensationalized. So always be discerning when we're talking about evidence and alleged information.
Case, suspected killer Bryan Kohberger is set to be arraigned on Monday morning at 9 a.m. This comes after a grand jury indicted him on 4 counts of first-degree murder on Tuesday. And now we are learning more about the suspects from Kohberger's own family, along with another bombshell allegation claiming the suspect, Bryan Kohberger, was involved in another crime that happened before these murders. Now, this incident involved his female co-worker at Washington State University. According to a Dateline report, someone allegedly broke into the woman's apartment and moved things around. Instead of calling police, the co-worker called Kohberger, who suggested and helped her install security cameras. But the report says Kohberger was behind that break-in and used those cameras to spy on her. Let's bring in now News Nation national security contributor, former CIA officer and FBI special agent Tracy Walder. Tracy, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Always great to see you. So first, let's start with this new allegation, which claims Kohberger broke into his female colleague's home and how he used this incident to spy on her. What does this claim tell you about Kohberger himself?
So, look, we have to take all of these as just claims, right? We don't necessarily have multiple sources, reporting that this is true. If this is true, and if this indeed happened, it really does point to his sort of pattern of stalking. I have always believed, it's just my personal opinion, that, the victims in the Idaho Kings Road house were not randomly selected. I do believe that in some way he stalked them, whether that was digitally or physically, we don't know. And so what this could point to is a pattern of stalking in that he was surveilling this person remotely, or in some kind of digital way. So that's what this would help point to.
And another huge claim from that Dateline report involves Kohberger's older sister. During the time of the killing, she noticed that her brother was wearing latex gloves around their parents' home and that he drove the white car police were searching for nationwide. That sister also suggested her brother was behind the killing. So now we reported that an ID and other evidence was taken from Kohberger's parents' home. What's the likelihood that his own family helped investigators discover that evidence if these claims are true?
If these claims are true, I wouldn't be surprised that someone in his family suspected that he was involved in this. If he was walking around wearing latex gloves consistently, dumping his trash in neighbors' trash and even going through his own trash and making sure that there was nothing suspect in it. He drives a white Hyundai. He lived close to the scene of the crime. I think those are all valid inferences, quite frankly, that members of his family could have made. But I could see people being on both sides of the fence. I could see his sister perhaps making a claim like this and someone like his father sort of in a way brushing that off. I would imagine it's very hard to be a parent and have a child being accused of something so heinous.
Certainly, I can't imagine.
So much speculation and reading into some of the evidence documents that have come back. I don't think we're going to find out today for sure what happened and why these young people were targeted. These victims in this case had some connection to him in some way. We're going to find that out at some point. But why did this happen? And that's what everyone wants to know. What made Bryan Kohberger do such a thing if in fact he is the perpetrator of these crimes? Steve Gonsalves wants to make sure we have the right person. I think there's a lot of doubt still based on some of the stuff that the Moscow Police Department had put out. I mean, they were hell-bent on a 2011-2013 Elantra, which it turned out not to be, and I think that's going to be problematic in this case. You know, he had a 15 Elantra. That was a different body style, and if you go back on my channel, you'll see that there were several videos done on that. A lot of speculative, you know, he's got cuts on his face, blood on a pillow. None of that really means a lot. People want to inflame some of this information. Again, even with the Amazon search warrant, it's alleged he bought the knife on Amazon, and based on the Dateline documentary, he may have purchased that while he still lived in Pennsylvania. But we don't know that to be fact yet. That's still speculative. And it may in fact be the case, but we just don't know it yet. With all these gag orders in place, I find it troubling that we have all these alleged source leaks. So I find a lot of them hard to believe. Him walking around with gloves, it was mentioned that he was a germaphobe and, you know, he would grocery shop with these gloves. They also brought up Papa Rogers. And again, I've covered that on previous videos. I believe there's some significance to Elliot Rogers, why he came up with that name. He was the Isla Vista killer, again, who was socially awkward and had a lot of the similar problems that Kohberger did. I think that he identified with him in a lot of ways, perhaps. Again, if you're interested in learning more about that, please check out some of my prior videos if you haven't. And it covers that. It also goes through the probable cause affidavit piece by piece and some of the problematic information in there that no one talks about. There have been some other players in this game that haven't been really closely looked at that, you know, could have been connected to this in some way. I wouldn't have ruled that out, and I think the police should have said something regarding that. There has been a player living very close by that we don't know if there's any connection to. A lot of people believe that, well, if there was, the police would have brought that out, but we don't know if it was ever thoroughly looked into. Again, the car thing is a big deal, and they've never come out and said that some of the videos released were, in fact, that car. But we will find that out when we get closer to trial. The most interesting piece I personally found of the Dateline was the allegations that a sister found him suspicious. If in fact that's true, then she must be talking to media. I also think a lot of the cell phone pings are going to be problematic in the case, being in such a small town. We don't know, again, if there are any other players, and, you know, he could even have been visiting someone he knew nearby. I mean, there's a lot of ifs in this case, but definitely stay tuned, and I will be covering this front to back. I do not run with rumors. Some of my earlier videos, there was some speculation because we didn't know who the suspect was, but I really try to stick to the facts. I'm hoping that you will subscribe to my channel if you haven't. Check out some of those earlier videos. I'm sure you'll enjoy them. And for now, be safe. Keep the families in your prayers. And thank you so much for watching.